exercise 1. For this exercise, we're going to create a virtual machine on the Azure Cloud. So let's begin. First, we create a new file. We're gonna name it main.tf. And we're going to define our provider. Terraform required _ providers. Azure RM. And the source is going to be HashiCorp Azure RM. The version will be equals 2.46.0. That's the version I'm going to use for this exercise. We need to include an additional section, which is provider. This is for features that you might want to use. For this exercise, I won't be using any of them, but still I am including it because it's mandatory. So with that done, we can save the file and run our first Terraform command. Terraform init. So it's basically going to download the Azure RM plugin, and it's done, completed. As you can see, it created one directory and a log file. So let's continue. I need to add another thing, which is a data source. The data source is going to be HTTP. Basically, what I'm going to do is grab my public IP address, and the reason behind that is because I want to include it on the network security group, basically to allow access to my to myself to the virtual machine, so I can perform any other operations to it. So data HTTP. The second section, the one that I'm typing right now, is entirely up to you. Doesn't need to have this particular name. You can name it any other way, like public _ IP _ address, or basically all together public IP address, or just IP. This is entirely up to you. I'm just gonna name it IP _ address. So the next part is a URL. This is required for this particular plugin, and the URL is http IPv4.ipv4.canh as in zebra IP.com. Let me double check. Yeah, that looks correct. So basically, this module is going to go to this particular website and download whatever content is in there. The only content that is on this particular website is going to be just my public IP address. It returns my public IP address on a plain text. So with that, let's continue. Or before continuing, let me save it because I need to run Terraform init one more time. The reason behind is to get this particular module. So let's do it. There you go, it's downloading it and it's already there. So now that I have everything that I want from HashiCorp, I can continue. So let's create our first virtual resource on the Azure Cloud, which is going to be the resource group. So in order to do that, we do Azure RM _ resource group. That's what we need to do in order to create a resource group. Name in here is entirely up to us. I'm just gonna type it rg. Name is a required field, so I'm gonna name it exercise -1. For the name, the required field in here is location, which is the region where you're going to create this particular resource on the Azure Cloud. I'm going to use ES US. And with that, we are done with this one. So let's save it. Let's run Terraform validate to check the syntax. No syntax errors, that's good. Let's run Terraform FMT just to give it a nice formatting to our file. So everything is aligned now. At least the equal signs are aligned. Now let's run Terraform Plan. Terraform Plan -out equals TF Plan. The reason to run this command, basically what you're doing is basically describing all the steps needed to create that particular resource. That's what Terraform is going to do with this particular command. It won't do anything on Azure yet. It's just going to define the actions that it requires in order to create that particular virtual resource. So let's hit enter. And it created a TF state file and a log for it as well. When it's complete, it's going to create another file which is called TF plan. And it doesn't have a state anymore, but that's temporary. I mean, those files are going to appear as soon as I run TF plan, apply TF plan. We can validate that is nothing here. So Terraform apply TF plan, and there it goes. Now it's going to create a Terraform TF state file, and it will create the resource on the Azure Cloud. The reason, the purpose of the Terraform TF state file is to keep track of the resources that are created or managed by Terraform. Okay, with that done, that was successful, so we can continue and create the next virtual resource, which is going to be the virtual network. Resource Azure RM again, _ virtual network. And this section I'm going to name it VNet, but this is entirely up to you. As usual, we require a name. So exercise -1 -VNet. This is entirely up to you, this section. The next one is going to be, as usual, location. Or, yeah, location. We can do location, or better yet, resource group name. Yeah, this is quite important. So basically the resource group name, since we already defined what our resource group is, because it's right here on this section in here. So basically all we're doing is just telling Terraform where to find that particular information. We just need to add the name, and now it knows where to get the resource group name. It will go to the Azure _resource_group .rg .name in order to get the information that it needs. The other field is location. Same thing, because we already defined the location, so we're basically just making a call to the resource group module, and we specify that location. Excellent. The last bit is the address space. This is going to be a list. Everything in brackets is a list, even though we're going to have just one element inside, but that's the syntax for a list of elements. So 10.0.0.0/16. It's a little bit excessive for one single virtual machine, but this is just an example. So let's save it, and let's make sure we don't have any syntax error with Terraform validate. No errors. Terraform FMT. Okay, now it looks nice and pretty. Terraform plan space dash out equals tf plan. Okay, so basically preparing all the actions needed to create the virtual network, and you can actually see in this output what it's going to do. Is going to create a resource called virtual network. This is the address space, and there's quite a few things that I didn't specify in here. So if we go up a little bit, group ID, we don't know that one. That value will be known once if apply. Same with the resource ID. After it gets applied on the or created on the Azure Cloud, we will know that value. Location, we specified that one is right here on line 26. Name is line 25. The subnet, we actually haven't created a subnet in there, so no reason to be concerned about that one. VM protection enabled equals false. That's fine. We're gonna leave it as it is for now. So let's apply it and let's create this other virtual resource. Should be done any moment. It's creating. Shouldn't take that long for this one, and it's complete. So I created a virtual network, and this is the ID for it. Okay, so let's continue. Let's create another resource. This one is going to be Azure RM _ subnet, and I'm going to name it just subnet, just because. It's entirely up to you, that section. Name, and let's give it a nice name like exercise-1-subnet. Resource group name. We're going to have that in several resources, and it's the same thing that we did on line 25. It's exact same thing. You can basically just copy that line if you want to. Now virtual network name is gonna follow the same principle as the resource group name, but instead of making a call to a resource group, we're gonna make the call to the virtual network. Since it requires the name, which is this one on line 24, we just pass it that name, and that should take care of this part. What else do we need? Oh yeah, of course, the address prefixes. So we're going to create a class C for it. Still overkill, but this is just an example. /24. And notice that in here you can have multiple elements. Well, this one I'm kind of restricted because of the address space, but you can have multiple elements if you create something bigger than this, than /16. You can have multiple subnet as well. And that's it for this one. So let's save it. Let's check it out for any syntax errors or typos. Okay, it's valid. Well, let's give it a nice format. Perfect, looks pretty. Terraform plan -out equals tf plan. So it's going to define what it needs to do, and it will only know, actually already knows that we have a resource group and a virtual network, so you won't see that displayed in here. Actually, as a matter of fact, it only tells you I only need to add one because I already checked on his plan and on the cloud what it has in there and what it needs to create or change. So let's run Terraform apply TF plan. And now we're gonna have a subnet. Okay, yes, created. That's right there. So everything good so far. Let's create another resource, which is going to be Azure RM, of course. Underscore public IP. Yes, this is the way that we are going to be accessing our virtual machine through a public IP, and that's why we are also restricting the access later on with the network security group. So name is entirely up to us. Gonna name it public underscore IP. Name equals exercise -1 public IP. Resource group name. Yeah, we're gonna have that multiple times. That name. On the location, of course. Same thing. It's pretty much repeating the same thing that we've been doing so far. The allocation method is going to be static because we want that IP to remain. Well, for this exercise, probably we can get away with something else besides static, but for now, let's imagine that we want something static. Okay, let's save it. Terraform validate to check for typos. All good. Format. Okay, and Terraform plan -out equals TF plan. That should be done shortly too. Shouldn't take that long. The virtual machine will take a little bit longer to create. Okay, let's apply it. Terraform apply TF plan. Now it's going out and creating, and it's already created. Perfect. What else? Oh yeah, we need another resource. Obviously, it's going to be Azure RM underscore network underscore interface. That's the one, and over here is I'm gonna name it network underscore IF. It's entirely up to you. The name, let's give it a nice name, exercise -1 IF for interface. Resource group name, yep, we know what it's going to be. That name, it's basically we're repeating the same thing over and over. And the next one, location, and it's going to be Azure RM resource group .rg .location. Now the next section is IP configuration. Name, of course, we need a name for it. Exercise -1-ip-conf. It's entirely up to you. You can put any other name. I'm using this one for this exercise. Subnet _ID. This is an interesting one. Azure RM, because this one we do have the subnet ID because we already created, but it's not on our defined on our template. It is not. It comes from this resource block, but it's not there. You don't see an ID because it's a known after apply. So the way to make that is just making the reference. It shouldn't be quite similar to this. Instead of that name is that ID. So Azure RM subnet .id. It's going to be something similar to this one. This is the public IP ID. The one that we are requiring over here is the subnet ID, because it's the subnet that the network interface is going to be associated with. Private underscore IP address allocation equals dynamic. Yeah. Yeah, for public IP addresses, I don't really care if they are static or we'll need static. Dynamic is fine. The public IP address, public underscore IP address underscore ID. So quite similar to the subnet ID, but in this case it's gonna be the public IP address Azure RM underscore public underscore IP dot public IP dot ID. And with that we are done with this section. Yes, so we save it. Terraform validate. Okay, configuration is valid. FMT on plan dash out equals TF plan. Okay, we just need to apply it. So Terraform apply TF plan. After this one, we are going to do the network security group. Okay, and it already completed. So let's do the network security group. So resource Azure RM network security group right there. I'm gonna name it NSG over here. Obviously it needs a name. Exercise -1-NSG. Resource group name. We all know what that is. That name. Location. Azure RM underscore resource group.rg location. Okay, nothing special on the network security group, but we need to add a rule. So we are able to access the resource. So name, gonna name SSH. Priority is going to be 1001. That's fine. With Azure, the lower the priority, the presence it has. So the lower the number and the priority is, the more the precedent that it takes. Basically, if you have another rule that is SSH for something else, or you're blocking something, just make sure you keep in mind the priority number where you put it, because you might be blocking something else. So that's something that you gotta keep in mind, just the priority, the numbers that you use. So for example, let's say that I want to prevent any access whatsoever. As a matter of fact, there is a rule already that is created by default that prevents any outside access to your resources, and that priority is 65,000 and something. I don't recall the name right now. I mean, not the name, the actual number. But for example, if I create a rule that does that, denies all access, and I give it a priority of 1,000, basically this rule, it will be void, because a previous rule with lower priority will be over this one, so it will overrule this one. Just keep in mind, if you are playing with your network security rules, just make sure you keep in mind your priority when you create them. Okay, let's keep going. Direction is going to be inbound, because we need to access it. The access allow protocol TCP source port range is going to be star for this one, because this SSH client, it creates ephemeral ports. Destination port range, that is going to be 22 for the OpenSSH server. Source address prefix. Okay, the source address prefix, remember the data HTTP for getting my public IP address? Well, that goes in here. We just need a little bit of manipulation, so we use chomp. We're going to work on those later on. For now, just type it as it is: chomp data dot HTTP dot IP underscore address, which is the one that I name it. That body. Yep, that's all it needs in here. The destination address prefix, well, it's going everything in this particular resource group. We're gonna have access to it. Yeah, that's it for this one. So let's save it. Even though we are creating a network security group, we still need to attach it to our well, in this case, the network interface. You can do it on the subnet. I actually prefer to do it on the subnet, but for now we're going to attach it on the network interface. So let's save it, and now that is saved, let's do a Terraform validate. Configuration is valid. Got stuck in there for a little bit. That's fine. Terraform FMT. Format is fine. Terraform plan dash out equals df plan. Okay, let's apply it. So Terraform apply df plan. So let's create that network security group. Perfect. Now we are ready to create the last, well, not the last, one extra resource. Resource is going to be Azure RM. This is a long name right here for this one. Network Interface Security Group Association. So, thinking what to name it. This is not really important. It's entirely up to you. Security group underscore SOC. Excessive name. Really long name right there. So, no name. This one doesn't require name. It requires actually, these are the two parameters that it needs right here. So network underscore interface underscore ID is one of them. Which is basically that ID. The same thing is just you specify Azure RM underscore network underscore interface network underscore IF that ID from the network resource, that network interface resource that we created, which is here. Getting the ID from here. And the other one that we need here is network security group ID, which is network security group nsg.id. And as a matter of fact, we have it right here. This is the ID. We could copy paste it from here and just put it there, but I mean, this way is better because it's more dynamic. That's it for this one. So let's save it. Terraform validate. Configuration is valid. FMT. Good. All good. Plan dash out equals df plan. Perfect. It's doing the association. Terraform apply df plan. Okay, now that part is done. We are finally going to create the Azure RM underscore Linux virtual machine. So the name is going to be exercise 1-PM. Not too original, but carry on. Resource group name. That name. The next one is location. Sure resource group .rg .location. Now network interface ID. Oops. Right here in this section is a list, so your virtual machine can have multiple interfaces attached to it. We just created one, so we are just going to attach that one. So Azure RM network interface dot network IF dot ID. and that's all it needs in here. The size of the virtual machine. Okay, for this I recommend you to pick the cheapest one you can find, because this is just a little tiny example, nothing really formal going on in here, but still. So I'm gonna pick this one. It's not the cheapest one. Don't recall the price of this one, but I mean it's gonna live for like what, 5 minutes, maybe less. What else? Size. We have the size. The admin username is going to be Azure user. Disable password authentication. True. I don't know why it went away. True. Perfect. Okay, so we won't have any password on this one, so we need to have keys. I'm gonna put it on the notes how to create keys for this one, so take a look at those. So let's continue with that one. Well, the reason why I disabled, where we are disabling the password authentication, is to make it more secure. That's all it is. So we are using SSH keys as opposed to using passwords in here, and we are also restricting the access, trying to be security conscious as much as possible, even for exercises or something like this that is not really formal or production like. It's still a good idea to keep security practices always in mind. So with that, let's continue. OS_disk. So name is going to be exercise -1 -disk. Caching equals read and write, and storage underscore account type equals standard for our example. Standard LRS. Standard LRS. Yeah, the other option is premium, but we don't need premium for this example. Okay, the source underscore image reference. So we're going to use a Ubuntu Server. So the publisher for that is Canonical. The offer, well, is Ubuntu Server. Ubuntu Server. The SKU, basically the release. So 1804 LTS. That's the long-term support version of them, and the version equals latest and greatest. Okay, now we need to be able to access this with SSH. We need to specify the public admin SSH key. Okay, let's continue. The username is going to be under the Azure user, and the public key, we need to specify the location. Public underscore key equals file quotes squiggly .ssh. Basically, I'm specifying my home directory id underscore rsa dot pub. Yeah, that's the one. That's closing there, and I believe we are almost ready. Let me include one extra block which is going to be the output. And for that one, I'm gonna name it public_IP_address. This is just the output. Basically, when we run this, when we apply this template, it will return back to us the public IP address, so we can SSH to it directly after we are done here. So the value equals Azure RM. Notice that we can specify multiple things to return back to us. We only want the public IP address, that IP address, the actual address. Yeah, that's it. That's it. So save, Terraform validate. Okay. Configuration is valid. FMT format plan dash out equals df plan. Okay. Oh, look at that. We already have our public IP address. That's good. Let's do Terraform apply df plan. This will take a little bit longer than the rest, a couple of minutes at least. I know why we have the public IP address right now, because we already created that one. So it just went out and fetched it for us. Makes sense. If it didn't, we just need to wait until it completes, or we can always run a Terraform output, Terraform space output, and it will return that information for us. Oh wow, 50 seconds to create it. Not that terrible, not bad. So let's see if it's true. Azure user at this address. Yep, keep yes in here. Yep, right, we are running on the instance. Excellent. Okay, yep. We close it. So since we already completed our exercise, let's run a destroy, because otherwise we're gonna get charged. So let's clean it up. That's the last command that we're going to run for today. Terraform destroy. It's going to go and delete the resource group, the virtual machine, network interfaces, network security group, all that stuff. Right now it's basically asking me to confirm, type yes, yes, I wanted to delete everything. I'm gonna take a little bit to destroy it. So with that, we conclude this exercise, and hopefully it's been useful for you. And well, happy terraforming. Thanks.